Hello, strangers on the internet. As a school project, I recently got the assignment to create a game, and I decided that I want to keep a record of the development of this game by making devlog videos on YouTube. As you might have been able to tell from the title of this video, the name of the game is going to be Snatcher, but that doesn't really tell you that much, so I decided that I want to dedicate this video to explaining the core idea of the game. See it as an episode 0 of sorts. When I first got the assignment, I immediately thought to myself, ooh, I want to create a space game. I didn't really have that great of an idea as for what the gameplay was going to be like, but the concept eventually evolved into this bounty hunter game of sorts, where the player would be tasked to capture rare aliens and then sell them. As you progressed, you would grow a bigger and bigger bounty on yourself, and would thus have to fight off other bounty hunters trying to claim your bounty. I actually got started prototyping this game, but then I talked to one of my classmates who proclaimed that he was going to make a card game, and I was like, yeah! That's what I'm gonna do. So naturally I decided to scrap the entire project and started working on something completely different. When faced with the problem of making a card game, I immediately came up with 3 different approaches. Number 1, I could make the game online multiplayer and have 2 players compete against each other using different decks that I've built on a surface level. This seemed pretty fun, although I was a bit intimidated by having to deal with the network code stuff, so that was no longer an option. The second approach would have me code an AI that the player would fight against, but that also seemed like a lot of work, so that was also off the table. The third approach would have the player roaming a dungeon using cards as their weapon to defeat enemies. This approach might sound like the most boring alternative, but trust me, with enough work, I believe we can make this concept something more interesting. So, how do we do that? I can't remember exactly what my thought process was like, but eventually I came up with this idea. The game is a roguelike top-down dungeon crawler in which the player spawns in a procedurally generated dungeon which consists of a bunch of different rooms. Each room will contain a random amount of different enemies and also random loot. The player is then tasked to kill each enemy in the current room to continue. The player will do this by using cards as their weapon of choice. I imagine the player just throwing the cards, which will then deal damage and apply additional effects and abilities. Here's the cool part. Upon killing an enemy, the player can then use a blank card to basically inscribe the soul of that enemy onto the card. The player can now use that enemy as a weapon. As the game goes on, the difficulty gets harder and harder, and it's pretty much the player's job to keep pace with the increasing difficulty. Naturally, upon starting the game, the player will have an empty hand that will say 0 cards in their inventory. Therefore, the game starts off with the player capturing their own soul in a card. I eventually imagine that I'll put some cool intro sequence to show this. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. I've actually started working on the game already and I've gotten a lot done, but more on that in the next video. If you have any questions about the game, like maybe I was unclear on certain points or just questions in general, feel free to ask them down below in the comment section and I'll either respond to them there or in the next video. Until then,